Hi, this is Johnny, and this is Laura Bakken's audience.
I want you to think back to when you were a child and you can remember your favorite familiar smell coming from the kitchen. Maybe it was the smell of warm baked bread, the soup simmering on the stove, homemade cookies, or freshly baked apple pie. I can smell the cinnamon now. It brings the memories and the scents rushing back. Think about the home cooked smells that came from the kitchen that remind you of what it was like for your families to take the time and love to cook, bake, and home can their own foods from scratch. I was raised on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, north of Halliday, North Dakota. My grandmother, who lived in Halliday, raised us during the week and took care of us. She would wake every morning, start her coffee on the stove in a kettle similar to this. After 1 to 2 cups of coffee with heavy whipping cream, it was time to set the bread. She would gather her ingredients and find her biggest silver bowl and set the most amazing bread dough. After the bread dough was set, it was time to grab the apples, peel them in rings, and I would catch them in my hands. She would use the rest of the apple to make the most amazing apple pie around. My grandma was a blessing. She taught me a lot, and she always smelled like caramel. Maybe it's because she made the most amazing caramel rolls around. I'm not sure. My parents, who lived on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, were really good cooks also. My mom, she taught us how to make jellies out of the Nanking cherry trees and the raspberry bushes. She taught me how to make pickles, peaches and pears and tomatoes. They were always a favorite at the local church luncheon. The taste of homemade jellies and freshly baked bread is something I have passed on to my little girls, Shanna Rose and Winter Rain. Each year we tend the garden together and pray for plenty of sunshine and rain in order to have a successful harvest in the fall. Finally, after we have been blessed with a successful harvest, it is time to gather in the garden and collect all the produce, bring it into the house and create our own pickles, jellies, and jams, and bake breads for the winter months. It was not easy growing up due to the fact that our family had to work hard for everything we had. Money was short, but the love of the family was strong. We worked the soil and we prayed for plenty of rain and sunshine in order to have our needs met in the fall. We also learned to care for animals, since our family had an assortment of chickens, pigs, cattle to tend throughout the year. Some of these animals would provide meat for the freezer. It took hard work, such as hauling pails of water, grain, and feed to the animals, cleaning the pig pens, taking care of the chickens, cleaning the chicken coops, and making sure that no cattle got out through the fence. This work was taught to us by our families, and it was done together as a family in order to harvest, can, butcher, and prep for the winter months. Our grandparents showed us how to prepare venison, beef, pigs for the freezer. They taught us how to make sausages, hams, and steaks, and hamburger all from scratch. We learned that food was a gift and we should use every part of the meat and never waste anything because food would help us care for each other during the winter months. We also learned the value of being thankful for what God provided us with. This was something of value, and I know that as I have aged, I have passed this on to my children. I want you to imagine the temperature outside being about 98 degrees, and the humidity is just hot, your skin is sticky. My mom would say, "Looks like the garden needs to be weeded." It was an open-ended statement. It was time to pull the weeds in the heat of the sun. We would pull weeds in one hand and hope for rain in the other. We knew running water would create a bill that our family couldn't afford. Money was tight, but it didn't stop us from preserving or thinking of ways to work together. My grandmother always found a way to create something out of nothing. Leftovers never were leftovers in our home, but magical creations that tasted better with time. As I aged, I found out ways to create leftover meals that were amazing also. Last night's chicken dinner would be tomorrow's leftover chicken noodle soup, the best cure for anything around that ails you. I was also taught to plan ahead, never to wait till the last minute, which is a gift that I hope to pass on to my girls. Our grandparents taught us how to prepare meats in the freezer by teaching us how to care for animals when it came time to harvest those animals. This was a hard lesson because as we cared for these animals, they became our pets. So when it came time to harvest, it was time to kill a pet or We knew they would be harvested and it would be hard to kill what we had raised. But this was a lesson that brought many tears to my eyes, but would quickly change to tears of joy during a holiday time when I was gathered around the table with my family and we could share a meal together and we were enjoying the fruits of our harvest and labor. My grandparents didn't waste anything, and at the time I thought they were a little crazy. We learned to be plenty handy with a butcher knife. We could cut steaks and make roasts and grind our own hamburger out of the beefs. We made sausages and steaks and hams and roasts out of the pig. And we harvested chickens. I learned how to plug my nose because the smell of plucked feathers stunk so bad that I couldn't eat chicken for a month afterwards. They taught us to use every part of the animal possible. For example, my thoughts were always, we're going to use what and grind it up why. For example, the pig's head, the ears, and the brain were used to make head cheese. This is something that I don't care for, but my family loved. When we butchered chickens, the chicken's feet were something that my grandparents would fight over at the dinner table. You see, there's a small piece of meat in the center of the chicken's foot that my parents and grandparents sometimes would fight over. Imagine smelling the most amazing chicken dinner, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob, fresh baked bread, and some desserts. The table is set in the most amazing display, and all Mom has to do is go over to the roaster and take the lid off. And once the lid is taken off, all you see are 4 sets of chicken's feet. In my mind, all I could say is, yuck. You would never say it because that would otherwise be considered rude. But my grandpa, knowing what was going through my mind, he would say, are you going to eat that? And of course, I would say, no, Grandpa. Go ahead, you can have it. Referring to the chicken's feet. I knew by my facial expressions and that my grandpa knew that I didn't like chicken's feet. So instead of me eating chicken's feet, he offered me a chicken's leg, which I was grateful for. As a child, I always wondered why I had to work so hard and what good it would do me in the future. As I aged, I soon found out that every little bit of what I thought was nonsense would turn out to be a life-saving attribute that I would need to save my own life and care for my family. After I graduated high school, I attended college, and I was on my 2nd year in college, and due to the fact that I grew deathly ill, I had to quit. Over time, I had been severely ill for about 5 years after that, with severe weight loss and immobility. I tried doctoring with no success in my corner. The doctors couldn't figure it out, and each day scared me, since it was time that was wasting, and every day I was literally wasting away. At the end of the 5th year in 1999, I had worked all day at a height of 5'6" and 92 pounds. But due to the illness and extended period of time, I had passed away during the night. And with the grace of God, my mom was able to find me, and I was revived by Dr. Jackson. At the hospital, Dr. Jackson said, you are a very lucky girl. You either have hyperglycemia or Addison's disease. According to everydayhealth.com, hyperglycemia is a blood sugar that is high, or that it's high blood sugar that is seen in people with diabetes that is not well controlled. It can either be mild to moderate to severe. Addison's disease is a rare condition that develops in the adrenal glands, which is located just above the kidneys, and it is an imbalance that doesn't help produce hormones. The symptoms are weakness, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, illness, intolerance to cold and heat, all the things that I had experienced. And of course, the result of the diagnosis was that I had Addison's disease. I smiled at the doctor rather than getting upset. I thanked him. Thank you for figuring out what was wrong with me. Now how do I get better? One way was through a healthy lifestyle. To my benefit, my family had taught me to work the soil and to raise foods that would be helpful to care for myself and my family. I got married in 2001 to a lovely man named Chris.
Oh.
Shortly after my diagnosis in 1999, being newly married, I tried my hand at making my own jellies, pickles, and processed meats, and we were pretty successful. One area that I knew I needed a little practice on was baking bread. You see, I always relied on my grandma and my mother to make the bread. Now I was on my own. It was time for me to make my own bread. My mom was very kind in passing the recipe down to me. I was very good at making fried bread, but my first homemade bread was nothing like fry bread. It came out of the oven nicely golden brown, just as this one is. Butter melted off of it, it looked amazing. But this wasn't my bread. As I took mine out of the loaf pan, this was my bread. It was like a brick. You could have used it in a Sunday football game. My husband couldn't even cut through it. So, as my mom came over to inspect my bread, she was laughing and making fun of me. But of course, I knew that with time and practice, I too one day would be able to make a loaf of bread like my grandmother. Working the garden is something that I have done since I was a little girl. I have learned that grown things are better, homegrown things are healthier for my family today. I have no immune system due to Addison's disease, and I've learned that overprocessed foods can strip the nutrients of foods. So as a child, my family taught me the skills I would need today to help prepare healthy foods for my family. As I grew, I thought that this was tough work, but today I am providing my family with the best start in life by growing organic foods, by processing them myself, and helping my daughter who has ADHD. One of the areas to help her is, and to alleviate symptoms, is to process your own foods, to have a gluten-free diet and watching the preservatives within foods. I am taking a proactive approach by growing, canning, butchering, and having a gluten-free home. This year, my oldest daughter turned 10, and her desire to have a garden of her very own was very evident. And I was standing in the store picking out seeds. I thought she was helping me while she was picking out these seeds, and she had a basket and she's putting seeds into it. And I looked at her and said, "Shanna, I already have those seeds." Shanna said, "Mom, I have and I want to plant my own garden this year, and I would like you to help me." My heart melted with joy as the little version of me was standing there. She had decided that it was her turn to plant a garden, and it was my job to teach her. So I planted each year with my mom, and I helped her harvest. Now my daughter was ready to try it on her very own. I was so proud of her excitement to plant, and as the weather plays out this summer, we too will gather in the garden to harvest, as my family did years ago, one harvest at a time and one generation after another. Today, we also butcher our own meats and foods and can them, and although it is hard work, it is a taste our family has grown to love. In my opinion, the foods are richer, leaner, and tastier than anything in the store. I am proud to have been raised on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, which has taught me to have close ties and have a great work ethic. I want you to think back to when you were a child. Can you remember those favorite familiar smells coming from the kitchen? Maybe it was the smell of baked bread, a soup simmering on the stove, homemade cookies, fresh baked apple pie. I can smell the cinnamon now, and it brings the memories rushing back, and the memories to come.